I'm so glad you came back to Gigi's Joy Corner. Remember, when you come to visit me, we always have to talk a little bit, maybe even a lot, about joy. J-O-Y. You know this is my Joy Corner, don't you? And I always like to ask you to say my favorite Bible verse with me. Do you remember where it's from? Philippians 4:4. Let's say it together. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again I say, rejoice. Boys and girls, that is just such a wonderful verse to learn and to keep in your heart and to remind yourself that we do have a lot of reasons to rejoice because God loves us. And you know what? That's kind of what I want to talk about today. It's the love of God. And I have a special story to read to you too. Do you want to read the story first and then let Gigi share with you a Bible verse? Okay, we'll do that then. The book that I want to share with you today is one that I used to read to my little children. And now my little children are all grown up. And they have children of their own. And I have grandchildren now that I can read this to. But you are my special friend, and I want to read this to you today. So thank you so much. Gigi will put on her glasses so I won't miss a word. And hopefully you will enjoy this book as much as my children and grandchildren. The name of the book is Guess How Much I Love You. Don't you like that title? Guess How Much I Love You. And it is written by Sam McBratney, and it's illustrated. That means the pictures were drawn by Anita Jerem. To me, this looks like a special book about a little bunny rabbit and a big bunny rabbit. That might be Daddy, it might be Granddaddy, it might even be Mommy or Grandmommy. It might be a special friend. But this is a little bunny rabbit that loves the big one. And I think the big one loves the little one too. You'll find out when we read the story. In the story, boys and girls, the author, Mr. Sam McBratney, he calls the bunny rabbit a hare. H-A-R-E. Have you ever heard a bunny rabbit called a hare? That's another word for bunny rabbit. And in this particular story, all the way through, when the writer says, little nut brown hare, he's talking about the little bunny rabbit. And when he says big nut brown hare, he's talking about the big rabbit. Okay, you got it? Let's read. Little nut brown hare, who was going to bed, held on tight to big nut brown hare's very long ears. Rabbits have long ears, don't they? He wanted to be sure that big nut brown hare was listening. Guess how much I love you, he said. Oh, I don't think I could guess that, said big nut brown hare. They were having fun together, weren't they? This much, said little nut brown hare, stretching out his arms as wide as they could go. Have you ever told somebody that you love them this much? That's what the little rabbit was telling the big rabbit. Well, big nut brown hare had even longer arms. But I love you this much, he said. That is a lot, thought little nut brown hare. See how little the tiny bunny was? And look how big the big nut brown hare was. That makes a difference, doesn't it? And how far you can stretch out. I love you as high as I can reach, said little nut brown hare. Well, I love you as high as I can reach, said big nut brown hare. That is very high, thought little nut brown hare. I wish I had arms like that. Then little nut brown hare had a good idea. He tumbled upside down and reached up the tree trunk with his feet. I love you all the way up to my toes, he said. He was trying to come up with all kind of ways to tell how much he loved the big bunny rabbit. And I love you all the way up to your toes, said Big Nut Brown Hare, swinging him up over his head. If you ever had any, like an adult, take you and kind of swing you, well, that's what this big rabbit was doing. He was swinging the little one up. I love you as high as I can hop, laughed Little Nut Brown Hare, bouncing up and down. Rabbits know how to hop really good, don't they? But I love you as high as I can hop, smiled Big Nut Brown Hare. And he hopped so high that his ears touched the branches above. That's good hopping, thought Little Nut Brown Hare. I wish I could hop like that. He was hopping so high his ears were touching the tree branches. Do you think that the little rabbit will one day grow up and be big enough to do that? I think so too. I love you all the way down the lane as far as the river, cried Little Nut Brown Hare. Well, I love you across the river and over the hills, said Big Nut Brown Hare. That's very far, thought Little Nut Brown Hare. He was almost too sleepy to think anymore. It was getting bedtime. Is that what you do? You talk with your mom or your dad or your grandmommy or somebody that's putting you to bed until you get sleepy? That's what was happening here. Then he looked beyond the thorn bushes out into the big dark night. Nothing could be farther than the sky. So he said, I love you right up to the moon. And then he closed his eyes. Oh, that's far, said Big Nut Brown Hare. That is very, very far. And they were both looking up at the moon. Do you see that? Big Nut Brown Hare settled Little Nut Brown Hare into his bed of leaves. You see, rabbits sleep outside, don't they? He leaned over and kissed him good night. Then he lay down close by and whispered with a smile, I love you right up to the moon and back. He was always wanting the little rabbit to know how much he's loved. You know, so often we try to tell those that we love how much we love them, and it's kind of hard to express what's in our heart, don't we? Don't you think that it's kind of hard sometimes? Sometimes we want to say, I love you all the way around the world a million zillion times. And somebody will say, well, I love you even more than that. Well, let me tell you who loves you and me more than we could ever imagine. Would you like to guess? That's right. It's God, isn't it? And you know, there's so many scriptures in my favorite book. You know what my favorite book is? The Bible. There are so many scriptures, verses, that tell us about God's love. But the one that I've picked out for us today comes from 1 John chapter 3, and it's the first verse. Listen to this. How great is the love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God. Oh, I love that verse. How great is the love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God. Two things I want us to talk about in that verse. Do you know what the word lavished means? It means that He just pours out His love onto us. He just gives us so much we can't even express how much it is. We know that God showed us by sending Jesus to earth to live on earth and then die on that cross for us. You talk about love. That is the supreme. That is the best example of love that we'll ever have. So God lavished His love on us. That was part of the verse. And did you hear at the end where it says that we should be called children of God? Did you know that you are a child of God? You are. Gigi is. We all are children of God, and He loves us. So never forget that that's where that joy that Gigi likes to talk about comes from, is knowing that God loves us. That's why we can rejoice in the Lord always. And again I say, rejoice. Thank you, boys and girls, for coming. I love you for coming and joining me. And I love you because God loves you. And we are all children of God. We all belong to the same family, don't we? The family of God. You have a great rest of your week, and I hope to see you next week right here in Gigi's Joy Corner. Bye-bye.